Our tour begins in the entry hall. Ludwig II lived from 1845 to 1886. He assumed the Bavarian throne at the age of 18 when his father died. Ludwig's passion was building castles. He built 3 during his lifetime: Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee, and Neuschwanstein. Plans for a 4th castle, Falkenstein, were underway when he died. In addition to his obsession with building, Ludwig also had a passion for classical heroic German mythology, a taste he shared with the German opera composer Richard Wagner. Neuschwanstein is decorated throughout with themes from these stories, most of which directly relate to Wagner's operas. The paintings in this room are from the Siegfried saga. The closed door leads to the tower, which is not part of the tour. The king was making his way to this very door when he was arrested in 1886. The paintings in this room are from the Siegfried saga. You are now standing in the king's bedroom. The theme of the bedroom is Tristan and Isolde, the tragic love story retold in Wagner's opera. The opera was given its first performance in Munich in 1865, and a 20-year-old Ludwig attended. This is probably the most elaborate and expensive bedroom ever created. It took 14 woodcarvers 4.5 years to create this room. It was this kind of extravagance that bankrupted the king. In the years before his death, he found it increasingly difficult to find money from any source.
Did they have running water in 1886?
The richly carved bed, with its canopy, resembles a Gothic building and its turrets. The bed's draperies were handmade by dozens of Bavarian seamstresses.
Maybe Ludwig thought all this luxury would help him sleep.
Scenes from the opera Tristan and Isolde. Scenes from the opera Tristan and Isolde. In the corner is a brown tiled stove with clay figures of Tristan and Isolde. You are now standing in the king's bedroom. The theme of the bedroom is Tristan and Isolde. This is probably the most elaborate. It was this. Scenes from the opera. This is Ludwig's private chapel. The king was a devout Catholic, as were all of the Wittelsbacher rulers. They supported the Roman Church even when other European countries were dominated by Protestantism.
It's a beautiful crucifix, ivory and gold. The Black Madonna of Altadine. I wonder what her story is all about.
The stained glass window depicts St. Louis receiving the last sacraments. This is the king's living room. The walls are decorated with scenes from the Lohengrin saga. The king first saw Wagner's opera Lohengrin when he was 16, and it so affected him that he considered it a form of enlightenment. The tragedy of Lohengrin was his essential loneliness. This too was Ludwig's own fate. Ludwig withdrew more and more into his fantasy world of epic heroes and absolute monarchy. An ideal he was determined to create in his castles if he could not have it in his real life. He only wanted to be alone with his dreams, so much so that even his servants were kept at a distance and were not allowed to look at him.
What were you afraid they'd see?
The miracle of the Grail.
These linens look seriously expensive and seriously old.
The swan motif is featured throughout the castle, but it is particularly prominent in this room. Both the swan and the lily were symbols Ludwig associated with himself. They represented his ideals of majesty and purity. The painting behind the swan shows Lohengrin's arrival.
More swans.
This is a reproduction of the grotto from the Tannhäuser saga. In such places, Ludwig could pretend he was one of his beloved mythic heroes. As the grotto personifies, the castles were solitary playgrounds built for Ludwig alone. He believed the masses were too coarse to appreciate fine art, and he seldom entertained guests. In fact, Ludwig had a standing order that upon his death, the castles were to be destroyed. Fortunately, the estate was in such debt that the castles were opened for paying tours only weeks after Ludwig's death. They haven't closed since. It is one of the great ironies of Ludwig's story that the castles that he was thought insane for building are now considered Bavaria's finest treasures. They have paid for their construction many times over.
I can almost picture Ludwig in here. I wonder what he really dreamt about in this room.
This is the king's study. Ludwig spent much time at his desk writing letters, drawing up plans for his projects, and studying his favorite authors. He loved poetry, history, and the classics. In later years, he also studied the occult. What affairs of state he did reluctantly attend to were generally attended to alone at his desk in writing. His reluctance to meet with his heads of state and perform the duties of the king were one of the reasons for the charges brought against him in 1886. But Ludwig dreamt of true kingship and a true monarchy, and the small powers left to him after Bavaria succeeded power to Prussia only incited his disdain and frustration. The study paintings depict scenes from the Tannhäuser saga and the Wartburg castle.
I doubt there's anything left in there now. Besides, the guard would kill me if I touched it. I wonder why he was studying the occult before he died.
The study paintings depict scenes from the Tannhäuser saga and the Wartburg castle. This is the final room of our tour, the Singers' Hall. It was modeled after the Singers' Hall of the Wartburg Castle, where minstrel competitions were held in the 13th century. The hall was built for small private concerts, but Ludwig himself never gave one here. It is said that during the last few years of Wagner's life, he came to Neuschwanstein frequently and performed for the king alone in this room. The hall is probably best known for its enigmatic wolf paintings. The original paintings were from the Parzival saga, but in 1882, Ludwig had them replaced, supplying the description and titles of the new paintings himself. While all the other rooms in the castle show scenes from Wagner's operas, the scenes in this room are not from any opera that anyone can identify. It is yet another of the many mysteries associated with the life of the fairy tale king.
Why would Ludwig have wolf paintings in his castle?
Engelhard courts Hildegunde. Engelhard and the blacksmith. The hunters track down Engelhard and Hildegunde. Hildegunde's imprisonment. The wedding feast of Hildegunde and the Baron. The death of Engelhard.
Nice view of the Alps.
Ludwig's childhood castle, Hohenschwangau, is visible from the lookout in the Singers' Hall.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Ich hätte gern eine Eintrittskarte fürs Museum.
Ja, 8 Mark für eine Ganztagskarte. So,
Danke.
bitte.
July 3rd, 1863. Elizabeth, you can have no idea, dear cousin, how happy you made me. The hours recently passed with you in the railway carriage I consider among the happiest in my life. Never will their memory fade. You gave me permission to visit you at Ischl. If the time comes for this ardent hope to be fulfilled, I shall be of all men upon earth the most blessed. The feelings of sincere love and reverence and faithful attachment to you, which I cherished in my heart even as a boy, makes me imagine heaven upon earth, and will be extinguished by death alone. I beg you with all my heart to forgive the contents of this letter, but I could not help myself. Ludwig. Elizabeth frequently gave Ludwig advice on royal conduct, hoping to protect him from unfavorable public opinion. March 1st, 1865. My dearest Eagle, you have not written me in a few months. I have missed you. I often try to imagine what you are doing. I hear tales that you have been on retreat and have not been seen in Munich for some time. I suspect it is this new friend you wrote up so mysteriously that takes you away from home. I hope you are enjoying yourself, my beloved, but I beg you to caution. The people need to see you at the throne. I also hesitate to suggest that what your officials do in your absence may not always be in your own best interest. You have always been a true king, but you must let the people see you to ensure that they don't forget that. E. Your dove. Ludwig's friends were concerned for his mental state long before his arrest. June 14th, 1878. My beloved Eagle, in your last letter you spoke so movingly of your torment that I was moved to tears. What is this torment? Why won't you confess to me what is truly troubling you? You must know that I would never despise you, no matter how horrible you believe your sins to be. Please do not write such barbs to my heart by even suggesting such things. If you do not wish to confess to me, at least tell me how I can aid you. I am always your true one, your dove. In this letter, dated November 1886, Elizabeth of Austria thanks Bishop Frank for his assistance in helping her fulfill Ludwig's last wishes. She writes that she knows it was an unusual request, but she believes Ludwig had reasons of his own for wishing it to be done. She hopes that his spirit finds peace at last. No further reference to this letter has ever been found. One can only speculate what the last wishes of a cornered and embattled Ludwig might have been.
What were his last wishes? This place is giving me more questions than answers.
They certainly make an incredible-looking couple.
She's beautiful.
One of Ludwig's few close friends was Empress Elizabeth of Austria. She was a distant cousin of the boy Prince, and he saw her often growing up. Graceful and beautiful, Elizabeth seemed to represent the feminine ideal to the younger Ludwig. Their friendship continued after her marriage, mainly by correspondence. She remained a source of stability for Ludwig throughout his life. In keeping with Ludwig's love of romance and drama, he called her the Dove, and he to her was the Eagle.
Ludwig is Prince Charming. He played the part well. Ludwig's Grand Master wardrobe from the Knights of St. George. Looks like it weighs a ton. Richard Wagner. Ludwig's diary. Ludwig kept a diary from 1869 when he was 24 years old until his death. The diary provides a fascinating look into the mind of this tormented man.
The original diary is kept in the Royal Archives. A few entries are shown on the opposite wall.
I've got to see that diary.
Signets and sash pins from the Order of the Knights of St. George. These were worn on Ludwig's uniform, as befitted his rank of Grand Master. They are now the property of the Bavarian Crown Treasury.
I wonder if these pins have any symbolic meaning. Ludwig and Wagner. Ludwig loved the opera of his contemporary Richard Wagner. He helped support Wagner's music through much of his life. Ludwig considered Wagner a close friend, often calling him the great friend. Wagner encouraged this infatuation, some believe, for personal gain. Typical artist. Even after Wagner's death, Ludwig still showed signs of obsession with the composer. This letter, written in 1882 by Ludwig to the conductor of the Munich Opera, instructs the conductor to make preparations for a new Wagner opera. The conductor went to see the king as instructed. When he arrived, Ludwig was ill and refused to see him. Nothing further was ever heard of this mysterious new opera. Was it a figment of an ill man's desperate wishes?
Ludwig is offered a crown of laurels by the genius of immortal fame. 26 July 1874. By the power of the lily, we shall have the strength to resist all temptations throughout the whole year. 26 July 1875. Solemn oath before the picture of the great king. Refrain for 3 months from all excitement. This oath has its binding power as well as its potency by de par le Roy, LNR, DPLR.
What excitement! I need to see more of that diary.
June 7th, 1886. A group of men arrive at Neuschwanstein Castle demanding to take the king in custody. With them is Dr. Guden, the doctor who had been in charge of Otto, the king's mentally ill brother. The men have an order for the king's arrest on the grounds of insanity. They are refused admittance by a brave group of farmers and local soldiers who have come to Ludwig's aid. They are forced to retreat to nearby Hohenschwangau. This is the first Ludwig hears of the conspiracy.
Ludwig composes a pamphlet explaining the subversive acts of the conspirators and eloquently pleading with his people for aid. The pamphlet is smuggled out of Neuschwanstein and printed, but the pamphlets are seized before they can be distributed. June 12, 1886. Ludwig knows the conspirators will return. He despairs. He asks his servant for the keys to the tower. The servant, fearing the king intends suicide, says the key is lost. Unbeknownst to Ludwig, the conspirators arrive at the castle. This time, there is no one to stop them. Ludwig is lured from his bedroom to the entry hall of Neuschwanstein on pretense. There, he is taken into custody. Ludwig is taken by carriage from Neuschwanstein to Berg, where his brother Otto had long been imprisoned. This is a great blow to the king's state of mind. While on the way, the group stops at Sieshaupt to change horses. Ludwig asks to see the postmistress, Frau Vogel. She brings him a glass of water and he says something to her. She never reveals these last words to anyone.
June 13, 1886. At Berg, Ludwig seems cooperative and coherent. Dr. Guden writes to the government that he has Ludwig well under control. The two men go out for a walk, and Dr. Guden is so confident he dismisses the guards.
When Ludwig and the doctor do not return after several hours, a search is undertaken. The bodies of the two men are found in the lake, drowned. Circumstances unknown.
June 18, 1886. Ludwig's funeral procession marches through the streets of Munich, followed by enormous crowds of mourners. The service is held at a packed St. Michael's church. Lightning strikes the church during the service, but no one is harmed.
Ludwig's body is entombed in the Wittelsbach crypt at St. Michael's. His heart is placed in an urn in the pilgrimage chapel at Altading in the Wittelsbach tradition. The urn is shown to the right. His heart is in an urn. How bizarre. I have no idea what that says. Looks old, though. Oh my God. That's the sleigh from my dream. The midnight sleigh rides. Ludwig went on long sleigh rides in the middle of the night, particularly in his later years. It is said that he suffered from insomnia, headaches, and toothaches, and the rides soothed his restlessness. The sight of the king's grand sleigh speeding through the countryside of the Alps often startled the peasants and became a superstitious omen of ill fortune. I can see why. But what was he doing out there at night? Ludwig embarking on his sleigh. Maybe Mrs. Smith will know what my dream meant. I have to ask someone. This thing is getting too weird. Ludwig's death mask. Wow. December 14th, 1881, Linderhof. Order another work by Jennings on the occult. Write urgently to Klug saying that I insist that the stoppages by the bank cease. I want it, and therefore it must be done. Write very urgently. He must succeed at once, and then must report to me urgently. If I give orders to clear my room, doing so must not be postponed as it happened. Pencils must be pointed without special orders. The day after tomorrow, 1,000 marks. How is Louis now? I want to know whether he looks unhappy. How often have I said that the coffee must not come up boiling hot, so that it can only be drunk after standing an hour? If any more correspondence come from Louis, they are to be burnt immediately, but I am to be informed of their arrival.
These are actual notes from Ludwig to his servants. They go far in showing the king's state of mind. They were smuggled out and used as evidence in compiling the order for Ludwig's arrest.
December 18th, 1881, Linderhof. Every day get up earlier, for certain. See to that very particularly. Write it down. Remember that when the great friend arrives at Neuschwanstein, we retire to the hall. We are not to be disturbed. I will not tolerate interference or insubordination.